Okay, so your social media feeds have probably been exploding with talk about the Epstein Files. It's a lot of noise, right? So today, we're going to cut right through all of that. We're going straight to the facts, to the actual court documents, to give you a clear, straightforward explanation of what this is really all about.
In this question, this is really what's at the heart of the entire story. We're not talking about online rumors here. We're talking about the very real possibility of silence being used as a shield for some of the most powerful people in the world.
You've definitely seen this phrase everywhere. The Epstein Files. It has just blown up, creating this huge storm of questions online. What are in these files exactly? Why is it all coming out right now?
So our plan here is really simple. We're going to slow the whole thing down, filter out all the noise and speculation, and then piece together what's actually going on so we can all understand this clearly.
To really get a grip on the files, you have to start with the man at the center of it all. You know, his story is basically the key that unlocks everything else we're about to talk about.
So, Jeffrey Epstein. He was this wealthy financier, but here's the thing. Nobody could ever really pin down where his massive fortune came from. But his money wasn't even his most valuable asset. His real currency? It was access. The guy built this insane network that connected him to the absolute highest levels of power. We're talking politicians, celebrities, even royalty. Now, his legal problems weren't new. He was actually convicted for crimes involving minors way back in 2008. But then, in 2019, things escalated. He was arrested on much more serious federal sex trafficking charges. And of course, his death in jail while he was waiting for that trial, well, it meant that a ton of questions were just left hanging in the air. The full story never came out. Okay, so with all that in mind, let's get into what people actually mean when they talk about the Epstein Files. What are they?
This is so important to understand. It is not one single list. It's not some secret black book that got leaked. The Epstein Files is just a term for a huge collection of different legal documents. We're talking witness testimonies, emails, flight logs, all from court cases tied to him. And for years, most of these records were sealed, totally hidden from public view.
So why is this a huge deal all of a sudden? It's actually pretty simple. A court order. A judge finally ruled that hundreds of these documents that were previously sealed had to be made public. And boom, that's what triggered this huge new wave of attention.
And this is where it gets really messy. On social media, you see a screenshot go viral, all the context gets stripped away, and people jump to massive conclusions. But the reality of digging through actual court records is way more complicated. You have to read them carefully to understand the massive difference between someone just being associated with Epstein and someone being guilty of a crime.
And listen, if you take only one thing away from this section, please let it be this. Just because someone's name is in a document, it does not automatically mean they're guilty of anything. People are named for all kinds of reasons. They could be a potential witness, an employee, or just an acquaintance. Association isn't an accusation, and an accusation is not the same as a conviction.
So what do these files actually show us? Well, they paint a picture of a massive social network. They confirm he had interactions with incredibly influential people. They contain these harrowing, heartbreaking testimonies from victims. And, maybe most importantly, they expose some really serious failures within the very institutions that are supposed to give us justice.
And those institutional failures, man, they bring up a much bigger, much more uncomfortable question. This whole thing isn't just about what happened, but how it was allowed to go on for so long. How was all of this protected?
See, the deeper story here isn't just a list of names. It's about a whole system that enabled his terrible behavior and for a very long time seemed to shield him from any real consequences.
It forces us to ask some really tough questions. Like, for instance, why was his 2008 conviction the result of this secret deal that almost everyone agrees was shockingly lenient?
And then you have to ask, why did it take more than a decade for federal authorities to bring new, more serious charges? This was after years and years of investigative reporting and so many victims coming forward.
And maybe this is the biggest question of all. Why did it feel like true accountability always seemed to stop? Like it could never quite reach the highest levels of power and influence?
When you step back and look at the whole pattern, you start to see a system that moved way too slowly. A system that seemed more interested in protecting reputations than in protecting victims. A system that allowed incredible wealth and power to operate with basically no real oversight or transparency.
So ultimately, this whole pattern of failure forces us to think about why this story matters so much. Not just as some crazy news cycle, but as a reflection on our ideas about justice itself.
Because this was never, ever just about one monstrously rich guy. His case is like a mirror held up to our institutions, and it reveals some really deep flaws in a system that's supposed to protect the most vulnerable people, not the most powerful. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? The files don't solve everything. They certainly don't close the book on this story, but you know what they do? They make it impossible for us, as a society, to pretend we don't know. The excuse of ignorance is just gone.
And that's maybe the biggest takeaway here. In a world where silence and secrecy so often protect the powerful, any piece of the truth that manages to break through, even if it's incomplete, is incredibly important. Transparency, in itself, becomes a form of accountability.
And so, that brings us right back to where we started. It's the one question that these files force every single one of us to confront. Are some people simply too powerful to ever face real consequences? How we answer that question is going to define what justice really means.